Thank you for the invitation. It's great to talk about food safety. Like on a Sunday, where we got a nice sunny day in Toronto today, and I'm in the backyard and anyway enjoying the weather. So just
Nice.
a little bit about myself. Name is Jim Chen. I study food microbiology in University of Guelph back in the early '70s, and after that went into public health, studied public health, and I became a certified public health inspector in Canada in 1977. And then started my training in 1977 and became a full-time health inspector in 1978. So that's just a little bit background on how I became a health inspector. Uh, Health inspector is a very different, unique type of job, and it's almost like the policing issue. It's almost like the education issue, and then all the regulation that we enforce as a health inspector, you can classify into health protection and promotion, combining the enforcement with promotion or promotion with enforcement. Uh, so after I started as a rookie health inspector for about 9 or 10 years, I advanced up to be the supervisor, eventually became the manager of the food safety program in Toronto. Uh, that's when everything just go crazy in 1997 when the province decided to amalgamate six health unit in the Toronto area into one giant Toronto Public Health. And imagine that we have six different food safety inspection programs before the amalgamation, six different database program. Try to merge it into just one single system was ridiculous back in 1997 with that kind of technology. So we overcame that. We put together the Dine Safe program, actually started in 1999. Myself, another manager, and a small team of health inspector just brainstorm of how we're going to put the six inspection program together into one. And at the same time, we introduce a disclosure requirement for food premises. The Dine Safe program was actually kicked in on the 7th of January 2001. That's when we posted the first green sign outside a restaurant.
Jim, tell us. Sorry, Jim, can you tell us what Dine Safe is for the people that aren't maybe from Toronto, the rest of the world, as far as Toronto's concerned?
Yeah. I thought the whole world used the Toronto system. But anyway, the Dine Safe program is something we call it the Dine Safe because its phone number is also Dine Safe, and people call the health department to lodge complaint. How it actually started is that, again, back to the amalgamation of the six different programs. The media start asking for inspection record on all the food premises in the six former health unit. We're not able to provide them because a couple of the former health unit were actually, they don't even have a database. Everything is filed with paper copies of inspection report. So the reporter from a local media start writing article about, I just love this name, I still use it. The title of the headline one morning when I read the newspaper was that dirty dining in Toronto. Because by the time that we release all the inspection report after a long time, some of the report being written down like, infestation, health hazard, food safety infection, stuff like that. And the reporter was saying that you're just holding on to all this inspection report, not telling the public about it, and you're not following up on some of the report or infection. So you're putting the public at risk. Now that was a strong statement that hit us like a 2x4. So we put together a small team. we work on a program saying that I think it's time for us to change the whole process of food safety inspection. Not like the old government thinking, whatever I wrote down on my notebook is my notebook and nobody's going to see it. Nothing is private because the reporter challenged us by asking us this. You're a public health inspector, you're doing a public health food safety inspection. Okay, are you protecting the business or are you protecting the public? How are you going to answer that? As a media spokesperson at that time, that was a tough question to answer. So we realized that, so we did some search. Remember back in the 1999 type of no such thing as Google search or whatever, and my cell phone is like that big. But we did a search around the world to see if any other health unit in somewhere in Europe, in UK, in the States, actually have some unique system that we can actually hopefully borrow. And everything came back saying no, everybody doing the same kind of inspection like what we used to do. Inspector walk in, walk out, and nobody actually have an idea what being observed, what are the violations, and what they're going to do about it. So the whole thing of transparency kicked in. So the follow-up article on the newspaper was that dirty dining, Toronto putting consumer at risk. So we actually work quite a long time on it's almost like 10, 15 hours a day, try to develop a system that have three components. We want to do a uniform inspection. No matter which health inspector walk into a restaurant, the inspection should be the same. Okay, so we have to design an inspection report that every inspector must use as a rating system. Second component is that we have to disclose the inspection report after the inspection. But how? We came up with the idea saying that we'll put something on the door, on the window, so customer can see it, easy to understand, and they know that, oh, gee, this is a bad restaurant. Maybe I should go somewhere else. Because not everybody can go onto the phone and then do a search on the inspection report online before they order the hamburger. So we said that has to be simple. So we came out with something like we're going to post a sign, and how are you going to alert people that one sign is good, the other sign might not be as good, and the third sign is that I can't go in because they got shut down by health inspector. So we came out with something like, say, some people call it a traffic light. The green sign got a big word say pass, and it listed the inspection date and record. And then we also have something like a warning. A yellow card will go up. That means that the inspector finds some infraction, not bad enough to be shut down, but has to warn the public that they did have problems. So post a conditional sign and have to be posted for a minimum of 12 to 48 hours. Within that time, they have to completely clean up the place, resolve all the issue, re-inspected by the inspector before they are allowed to remove the yellow sign and replace with a green. And if you walk in, like as a health inspector, I've been doing this for 36 years before retirement. I have seen my share of dirty dining. When you walk in, you say, oh my God, what's going on? Just for example, the one place that the inspector called me up, he said, Jimmy, you got to come down and do an inspection together. You walk in and all the staff wearing rubber boots. On Bloor Street, there's a sushi place. I said, why are they wearing rubber boots, right? Turned out to be a sewage backup in the basement, where part of the food storage is in the basement area. So when they go down the basement, they got rubber boots on, walking on sewage, So we shut that down right away. And because we have to notify the customer out there, this place be shut down and no one can enter except the repair person, operator for cleanup and stuff like that. We came out with this nasty red sign. is a close, and they post it right. And in the middle of the red sign, they also indicate all the infection that lead to the closure, such as infestation and all that. So by coming out with that signage, the last hurdle is how we're going to disclose all this information online. Okay, now remember that's 1999. It cost us a fortune in Toronto at that time, but we came out with like a database system that the inspector can enter. That's the inspection report with all the check mark. Enter that information, we'll come out with a rating, whether it's a pass, conditional pass, or closure. And this would go on to the website called the Dine Safe Toronto website. Early technology, it works, but costs quite a bit of money to put together. But since the implementation in 2001, it's still ongoing. So it's working great. There's a lot of upgrade in between too, and so that's how the beginning of Dine Safe started in Toronto, and just we went public, posted the first green sign, and we never looked back. So that's just a little bit history of how Dine Safe became a food safety inspection program. That after we put that out, we got a lot of feedback from health departments from other countries. So we start getting visitors from, even from Scotland, from the States, different states, from the US, from the UK. I even entertained one group from mainland China who sent a team of about almost like 40 people to come and study the Dine Safe program so they can actually brought it back. And one good thing is that it was implemented in a couple of the big cities in China, like in Shanghai. I think Peking is another area they implemented. So they use the same green sign, yellow sign, and red sign, except they also put in the happy face, the sad face, and the mad face for the red closure. So people modify the sign, that's fine. But the main thing is to disclose to the public. We are not hiding anything from the public. What the inspector observed is what to go on the website and reflected on a color sign that posted at the restaurant.
Jim, are you able to put your mic on mute just for 1 second? I'm going to ask a question. I think I'm getting a lot of feedback. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Just for I'll prompt you when to turn it back on. But were the politicians, when you were thinking about Dine Safe, were they pushing back on that disclosure system, or did you have was there enough sort of did the paper generate enough negative feedback that even the politicians were for the change? You're still on mute. Sorry. Your mic. Yeah. We'll stop it after this. It's obviously not going to work.
Okay, I put the mic back on.
Yeah.
Okay. With the political feedback, at that time, don't forget, the headline in Toronto created a lot of political feedback from the amalgamated government at that time. And lots of politicians, they jump on the bandwagon by saying that, like politicians very often that we say, we can't allow this to happen because because of the dirty dining in Toronto. We need to protect our citizens. Everybody jumped into the bandwagon by saying that health inspector has to do more. They have to do this and that, and that was a different atmosphere because they were pushing for something to protect the public health. So at that time, the program came on without really a lot of the political pushback, except the pushback was actually from the operator or from the food business in general, because in the early stage, everybody look at, that's not fair. I can clean up a mouse infestation in 2 hours. That type of excuses still continue. And why the inspector posts a yellow sign or a red sign on my door. So the pushback were actually from some of the food business people, even some organization representing the food business people, even a legal challenge by association that representing a lot of the restaurants and hotel. We resolve all those. We get like support from the politician to put that on, and we actually conducted an assessment in 2004 to show that the program works. It reduced the non-compliance from 74% in the first year that we put in Dine Safe to up to 85 to 89% in around 2004.
Wow.
So now the compliance rate for food establishment now in Toronto is kicking around, before I retire, kicking around maybe 90% to 92%. So just to show that the system works, and we'll continue. I hope that other health unit or other government agency will look at this kind of disclosure system as part of the inspection program.
So with that, let me segue into what's happening here in Alberta right now, with the, I think it's 17 people that are on kidney dialysis because of acute kidney failure here in Calgary, related to an E.coli outbreak at I think it's 11 daycares, they believe linked to one central kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is the weird part of maybe this, and I think that's where the discussion is going to go, is a disclosure system in this case would have not alerted parents to possibly the issues that the central kitchen was having, because they were receiving food from the central kitchen. So
Mm-hmm.
the disclosure or a posted inspection would have been at the central kitchen, because they were delivering the food to these daycares.
Yeah.
So if you had the benefit of seeing the central kitchen, then okay, you could see, in this case, it looks like they would have had, in some cases previously, a conditional pass.
Mm-hmm.
Here locally, Alberta Health Services has said on a few occasions that the central kitchen was in compliance at the time of the outbreak. So my question would be your thoughts on, and you closed with that, and I believe in that as well. I would hope that health units would adopt a similar system to Dine Safe, right across Canada and all over the world for that matter. And I think the last inspection should actually be there, right? So if there's no infractions, then it's like in your system, it's green.
Yeah.
And if there was infractions, then what are they? I want to see them right there.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's peeling paint in the back room, over the entrance door, I'm not really worried. But if it's if it was a lack of sanitizer or something on the more serious nature, then I can decide, hey, you know what? I'm not going to take that risk in dining here today. The interesting thing about what you said is we started our company in 1999 and we started teaching in 2000. Toronto and Dine Safe was coming out at that point, and I was reading Jim is located near the airport, or he's in the flight path in Etobicoke, near the 427, I'm assuming. Yeah. We were teaching what was happening in Toronto, and we were speaking about what has been happening in Toronto. And if we ever had somebody in our class out here that had come from Ontario and Toronto, I, as the instructor and the people that worked for me, because we talked about this a lot, I would ask, "Hey, you're from Toronto? Yeah. Have you seen this?" And I'd put a picture up of the Dine Safe, the red, yellow, green, and I would ask, what did this do? What did this mean for your restaurant? And almost universally, the people that worked at the restaurant, their comments were that if you had a yellow, you were out of business. You were doing no business because people weren't coming in. And as much as that sucks, it's actually having the desired effect, because now, as the restaurant, you want to be in compliance. You want to fix those things, and you want to fix them immediately because you need to get that yellow card to a green card. I think what we have in Alberta here is not good, because that the inspections are posted. That did happen, but there's no. That's I guess Alberta Health Services would say that is public disclosure, because people could go and look at the inspections. The problem is nobody's going to go look at an inspection before they go to a restaurant. Geeks like me and possibly you would, Jim. That we would, and sometimes intentionally I will not, because I do not want it to ruin my experience. I will look at the restaurant when I'm there, but I don't want to go and look until I've actually experienced it, which is probably not good for a food safety guy. So, thoughts on the E.coli outbreak? Jay had mentioned we'd spoken about HACCP and central kitchens in the past, and the risk that they pose. But given, I guess, a summary of what you've read and seen, what are your thoughts on? And I think we have a similar view on this. What are your thoughts on what possibly might have happened here? The challenges that public health is facing, and then let's come back when we talk about those things and have another couple questions. Yeah, you're muted, Jim. Sorry, Jim. You would need to unmute.
Okay, yeah. I forgot to. By looking at the whole outbreak situation now from as an outsider looking in, I'm supporting the local health department, because I have been through major outbreak like this many times.
Mm-hmm.
It's stressful, okay? But the main thing is that they are doing the best. Health inspector in Canada, one good thing about health inspector in Canada is that we all train the same way, and it has to be certified to practice in Canada. So I strongly supporting the E.coli up in Alberta health services now doing the best to investigate. But going back to what I said about Dine Safe, about central kitchen, we do have central kitchen in Toronto, and we did shut down a few before. The reason why, Dine Safe program brought in the risk assessment requirement for health inspector. Okay, every first inspection of the year is a full hazard-based audit assessment to determine the risk of that establishment, because risk of any food business can change overnight. A variety store from a low risk, suddenly they start flipping chicken, hamburger, start serving full meals. Overnight, they would become from low risk to high risk. So central kitchen, back to the risk assessment. Inspector would know if a central kitchen is catering to high risk population, such as nursing home or childcare center. That inspection of those establishments were based on a high risk requirement, maximum visit, and also, for example, in the Dine Safe program, If the inspector determined that there's a risk, there's infraction after documented, they have 48 hours to correct them ASAP, because it follows with enforcement action. Some health unit may not use the enforcement until sometimes too late. Enforcement works because if that kitchen did not meet the requirement and observe a number of crucial or critical infraction, that's immediately increase the risk of food poisoning.
Mhm.
Inspector have choices of either shut it down or say you stop your production until you got everything cleaned up, like a conditional pass for 12 hours or 48 hours. If they not get those done, you can't just walk away, say, okay, I'll give you another week, I'll give you another month, or I'll see you next time. You can't do that. In Toronto, the Dine Safe program built into that. If they are not corrected or repeat offenses or infraction, the inspector can issue either a ticket or summons for them to go to court to answer in front of the court. And that, pardon me?
Sorry, Ontario does have a ticketing system where you can issue a fine. Alberta does not.
Yeah, see, unfortunately,
No.
that's why health unit have to work with the local justice system to determine what action can the health inspector. Like you can shout at people. Sometimes it just don't work. Every time you walk in, you see a dishwasher is not working, or people not using sanitizers. I don't believe in chemicals. You can't do that, right? Or washing dishes in lukewarm water. If the dishwasher temperature show that way under, that means that you're washing dirty dishes with dirty water, and your final rinse cycle, what coming out is still dirty dishes. So back to the enforcement follow-up. You have to build in a system that if you have repeat offenses every time the inspector comes in, or the inspector say, hey, I'm too busy, I'll fix a sewage leak maybe next week, when the plumber comes in. Imagine that now you're putting everybody at risk if you walk away allowing that premises continue to operate.
Yeah.
Remember the rubber boots where the food handler wearing? If we didn't shut that down, those rubber boots would be tracking sewage all over the restaurant.
Yeah.
Remember, when you take rubber boots off, you use a hand, right? In that case, if that goes onto the cutting board and goes to the food, again, it's a high risk of foodborne illness. So back to the investigation. It is going to be a lot of data to look at, a lot of observation, a lot of interviews. I have confidence that the colleague up in Alberta Health Services, they're doing the best they can, and hopefully we'll resolve the investigation and determine what actually caused the illness. Now, I'll just give you an example of my own experience that I handled one Salmonella outbreak that linked to a gathering. Over 125 people became ill, and 4 of them became critically sick too. What it links back to was the restaurant staff at nighttime using a container to marinate chicken. Okay, after they marinate, they transport that into another container, but that container was just rinsed, left at the dishwashing area. Hopefully, the morning shift will do the dishwashing. The morning shift came in, it looks clean. They used that to make a potato salad. And that potato salad was so contaminated with 4 different kinds of salmonella. Okay, one of the key one was Salmonella typhimurium, which we isolated from almost all of the patients that became ill. And also because of the transportation from this catering to the utopical site, it took about 3 to 4 hours because of traffic jam. So imagine that you have a contaminated potato salad, gone through a long incubation period during transportation in a non-refrigerated truck, sit on the buffet table for another half an hour. No wonder people will start getting sick almost the same day. So again, using that kind of experience to look at an outbreak, what can go wrong? The container that make the potato salad looks clean, but is there any record showing that they've been rinsed, washed, and disinfect before they use that mix the potato salad? So hopefully something like this may come out during the investigation. But again, the stress level will be high. Inspector will just I yeah, got cut off. Okay, yeah, we'll get back on. Okay, we're back to business.
Mm-hmm.
So you want me to continue with the okay. Yeah, yeah. I okay. So like I said, the investigation is still ongoing, and wish all the investigator all the best to locate, to determine, actually the cause of an outbreak. And again, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, it's all depending on the operator. The health department will issue, recommendation changes, like whatever they identified. Not going to speak for them, but just from my own experience, using the listeria outbreak we had in linked to a maple leaf cold cut. We lost over 40, I think 22 people that died from the diphtheria outbreak. Uh, Again, like any major outbreak like this, once the report is completed, identify all the critical control points that leading to the outbreak or may cause that outbreak. Uh, it's not going to point finger whose fault is that. It's any breakdown in the system is the cause of most of the outbreak. Okay. Hopefully, once the evidence came, coming out from the investigation showing maybe 4 or 5 highlighted points that link to the outbreak or the cause of the outbreak, I can use the previous one, like the listeria. In Toronto, we actually find a lot of those cold cut meat being distributed to nursing homes and hospitals. Imagine high risk patient, high risk residents, okay? And unfortunately, some of them die. Uh, Again, the company took full responsibility. As we all know that the owner of the company went to do a public apologize to the public, and take on the responsibility. After that, we did see a lot of improvement. Okay, from the old food processing plant to they rebuild a brand new one that completely changed the tone of food safety for the way that they process meat. Okay, that's one recommendation that we can compare with a major outbreak like the one that being investigated now in Alberta. And also remember about 10 years ago, we have quite an outbreak with 250 people sick from the CNE, from the Corona burger and the bacon jam. Again, that was my last management of outbreak before my retirement. Is that the company didn't realize that because they subcontract out the bacon jam to be made by somebody else. They only flip the burger and then squeeze the bacon jam onto the burger, not knowing that the place where they make the bacon jam are not inspected by public health. It's a cooking school. And second of all, contamination happened at that school. So the bacon jam was fully contaminated when they squeeze on the Corona burger and serve it to like many people, 12 in the hospital, over 250 got sick. So again, once we put a stop to that kind of production, okay, we eliminated the health hazard. Okay, but the next step is that if the operator want to continue to manufacture the same food or the same operation, the operator now has to follow a long list of requirements before they are allowed to open for business. So that's what usually happens after a major outbreak like this. Business can maybe go belly up and shut down. Lawsuit may be pending against the operator. We don't know. Often that it might even be linked to a permanent shutdown by revoking the license by the local authority. That's a different way that could be the outcome if it's being proven to be directly linked to the central kitchen.
Jim, I think a couple points. I think Alberta does have a risk assessment initially. I don't know if it happens annually. I cannot speak to that. But initially, they do have a risk-based assessment that they conduct to determine the frequency of inspection for a particular facility. I agree with you. Central kitchens do pose a risk in themselves, which is hard. I have a lot of empathy for AHS because it's really hard. They're dealing with a lot of sick people. That's the first thing. But foodborne investigations, when we talk about this in training, is really hard for public health because they're often well, almost always after the fact.
Yeah.
So they're coming in 1, 2, 3, 5, 7 days later, right? So the challenge often is that the food involved is often gone.
Yeah.
It's consumed. And that poses a bigger challenge because now there's maybe one of the key components is missing, right? You only have the sick people, the sick patients that are shedding the bacteria, or they've been tested. In this case, it's E.coli, S-tech, Shiga toxin emitting bacteria. So the investigation is hard. Even when you mentioned Maple Leaf, Jim, that took weeks for them to determine, right, the source. But it was flagged. Here's the interesting thing. It was flagged by nursing homes and public health locally across the country, saying, hey, we're seeing a spike in this.
Yeah.
And out of what came out of that, at the end of that was, some changes on Maple Leaf. I think it was really good. They took ownership right away. Yeah. We got the Public Health Agency of Canada, which, in some senses, it was a good thing because now you got a national coordinating body.
That's right.
Health is still a provincial provincial domain, and public health in some places like in Ontario, you'd have do you have 35 different public health units?
Oh, it's probably the number is getting smaller by
they're trying to whittle it down, right?
Yeah, when I first started, it was 42 health units in
Wow.
1978. It pretty much that is down to 30 something. I had lost track on the number.
So
now.
You have 32 health units that are they follow sort of a provincial mandate, but they can all kind of do their own thing. A benefit that Alberta has is we have kind of one overreaching body, Alberta,
same as
Alberta
Quebec,
Health Services. Quebec, I think, and so there's some benefit to that you kind of have one uniform approach. I think the other thing that is going to be really hard for AHS and any public health inspector after something like this, and even during, there's all these questions, that the media have, the families have, now there's already a class action lawsuit that started. The public health is really in a no-win situation, in my opinion, because the reality is, even if they were on a frequent inspection period of 6 times a year, which I think would be highly unlikely, but let's say they were getting 4 inspections a year, or 3, or even 2. The inspection is a snapshot for that 1 or 2 hours.
That's right. Yeah.
It's only a snapshot of when the inspector was there. And we teach, and I strongly believe, well, I only believe this, is it is not public health's job to protect the public. It's part of their mandate, right? But their enforcement of those regulations happens 2, 3, 4 times a year, sometimes only once a year. But the operator is there. Jim, we did this. I told you what we teach for a long time. The public health inspectors are there. Let's say they're there 4 times a year, and they're there for an hour or even 2 hours, Jay, which would be unheard of unless it's a really big facility. So they're there for 8 hours over the course of 1 year. The operator, the manager, or the supervisor, or all of them are there, let's say 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. So 50 hours a week times 50 weeks a year. We'll give them 2 weeks off for holidays, which most restaurants don't do, by the way. So they have 2,500 hours on site, meaning the operator is responsible every day for the safety of the food that leaves their facility, Well, not only leaves, but also comes in, right?
Yeah.
So they have to make sure they've got a safe source coming in.
Yeah.
Back to the Cronut burger and the bacon jam. I didn't know that it was an unapproved facility that was supplying the.
Yeah, it was a cooking school.
Mm.
That's not inspected by health inspector. Yeah.
So, but would a cooking school not normally have a food handling permit? Not necessarily.
No, it is an exemption granted to facilities that do teaching of cooking because they are not serving
Really?
Food. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So
I think here in Alberta it would be different. I think cooking schools and baking schools are inspected.
if they inspect it, if food being like very often a cooking school, we also have a retail that sell whatever they cook. In that case, it would be fully classified under the Ontario food premises regulation as a food premise. Okay. Again, inspection, like you and I have a conversation before, like after being an inspector for so many years, that inspector can only show, even if an inspector inspect a restaurant every day for 6 hours, what happened after the 6 hours when the inspector left? Lots of people look at the inspector, you have to be protecting this whole food industry by patrolling them. No, it can't do that. No. Say, for example, when at that time, before I retired, was 69 or 70 public health inspector assigned to the food safety program, almost like 20,000 food establishments. Okay?
Not enough.
The reason Dine Safe kicks in, the attitude has to change for operator is that we, as a health inspector, the mandate for high risk in Ontario is about 3 times a year, unannounced, okay? 2 for medium risk, and then for low risk is 1 inspection, okay? You, as an operator, we've been doing so-called training, educating, or reminding operator that you are your own health inspector. Because if you get a nasty inspection report like this, very detailed, hazard-based inspection report with check mark and comment written down by the health inspector, when people call and complain to the health inspector, I always say that you have the report. I also read the report. If you take photocopy, 100 copy of that report, and make yourself or your staff do their own self health inspection every day or every other day or even once a week using that report. When you identify the infection, correct it. A mouse today is going to be 2,000 mice running around if you don't do anything in a month. If you see a mouse today, wait till the inspector come in, he'll tell me how bad my infestation is. That was the old attitude back in the 60s and 70s. Okay. Nowadays, operator is fully responsible for the health and safety within their own establishment. A health inspector only comes in to audit. Just like if you run a stop sign every day because the cop's not there to catch you, until after a year, you got to take it for running a stop sign. And you say, why can't a cop be there 24 hours to remind me? It's the same attitude any operator should adopt. It's not the health inspector coming in to actually to enforce whatever they said on their inspection report. So you can let go once with a warning. If you continue to repeat offenses or not correcting what the inspector identified, there should be a penalty. And that's also my belief, even after my retirement, is that why can't that restaurant be fined? Why can't that be shut down? Okay, if you let them go for like say a week before you reinspect it, you're allowing the health hazard to continue for that week before you go back and say, oh, didn't do anything, I'm going to shut you down. What happened within that 1 week can cause an outbreak as we are dealing with now. Look at, for example, the cold cut, the Cronut burger, and the bean sprout type of outbreak. Once you have an outbreak, Okay, you have to shut it down. So when you shut it down, you eliminate a health hazard. And then you follow up with the investigation to identify everything that linked to the outbreak. And then you make recommendation or enforcement action should follow after that. Okay. I understand there are lots of big outbreak now being sued by private, law firms and stuff like that. But from a government point of view, has to be some kind of enforcement built in. Like a nursing home, you can inspect a nursing home and identify 45 risk items that can lead to health and safety. Okay, he said, okay, I'll see you next month then. When you come back next month, oh my God, you didn't do anything but get worse. Are you going to allow that kind of nursing home environment or daycare or even a restaurant or hotel to continue with a health hazard until something happens? Okay, you've been educating food handler for a long time. I heard this complaint all the time or argument when you try to point out infection in food businesses that I've been in food business for over 30 years. Oh, once as soon as they say that, my hair just stand up, the thing is that though, I've been in food business for 30 years. You junior come in and tell me what to do. I'll come into your kitchen at home and I'm going to find out, like, once the person have that attitude of arguing, instead of admitting that, okay, I saw the cockroach running around. I'm so sorry. We're just a little bit too busy. We shut down the kitchen now. We can call somebody in to completely clean up or sewage back up. I'll call a plumber now to get after, and then I'll clean and disinfect and I'll use the food safety protocol. That's it. But as soon as they say that, I've been a food handler, or I've been in business for a long time, and nobody ever gets sick from my food. I said, you know why I'm here? Just like the health inspector investigating, like say, dog bite situation under the rabies, right? Same thing. The dog chew up some kids next door. When the inspector showed up, it's, oh, don't worry, my dog won't bite. Come on in. Like you hear the same kind of argument, like running a stop sign. Yeah. Why didn't the cop there last week when I ran it and put a stop to it or educate me about not running a stop sign? Until you got a ticket in hand, it blew up, got upset, rip it up, start fighting. Operator very often, a small number of them reacted the same way. I have incident of people that just say, I don't like your report, and they rip it up and then just toss it. I said, well, that's your copy. I still have my copy. I'll see you in 24 hours, and the yellow sign goes up. Again, that is a kind of motivation in a way for people to be compliant. Okay, they might not like the inspector after that, but again, after 36 years, I don't think everybody likes me as a health inspector. Yeah. I do have people, say nasty things, fight back. But on the other hand, the inspector have to remember, we got hired as a public health inspector. Remember the word public. We do public health inspection, public.
Yeah.
We are protecting the public. Again, three public. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's the job.
Jim, shortly after Ontario had their issue with the paper and the posted inspections, Alberta had an Auditor General report about our system. I think that was spurred by, I don't know what the history is, but it was shortly after what happened in Ontario. Alberta had a similar, in our case, it was an Auditor General's report.
Yeah.
And, there was no follow-up. There was a lot of things that weren't happening in regards to the public health inspections. And what you just said reminds me of one of the key lines in this Auditor General's report, which was that the public health units were there to protect the public. This was a statement in the Auditor General's report, the auditor's report, the Alberta Auditor General's report, to tell public health, you're there to protect the public and not the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny because I argue for more closures. And the reason I argue for more closures, really, I want more education so that there's less closures. But I think when public health, and here's the challenge for public health, is they're reluctant to close down a restaurant. Because they understand that it's also going to be impacting people's livelihood. So they don't come to that decision lightly, which is probably a good thing, right? Because there needs to be some reason to it. But the for the restaurant industry, we want those bad restaurants to be closed down because they unfairly taint the good ones. Like you said, you have a 91% compliance. And you came from 70 or 75. I'm not sure what the number was before. And Jay, we've spoken about this. The reality is the vast majority of restaurants have the attitude of, I want to fix it and I want to make it right.
Yeah, that's right.
And there are the few that are unreasonable, frankly, idiotic, for lack of a nicer word, in their approach to, what the hell do you know? You're only the public health official, and you're only here twice a year, right? It's well, if you can point out a shopping list of 5 pages of infractions in the 45 minutes that you're there, imagine if you were there for 6 hours, what you would find.
That's right.
So that attitude, I don't know if it'll ever go away, but I want to see it keep getting reduced, because it is doing a disservice, to the public, because they're put those restaurants and those restaurateurs or facility owners or facility managers with that cavalier attitude. They're hurting people. They're making people sick.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree, because if I write something down on my report and it's going to the filing cabinet in the office and nobody's going to see it, right? What's that going to help? Is that going to cause an improvement to the program? Don't forget, the health inspector or the health department has their own program to inspect. But within the food establishment, that is actually where the action is. If the inspector gives you a nasty report, if the person rip it off, that was the end of the communication within the restaurant. But it's still in my hand as a health inspector. I can come back right away. I can actually come back the next day. If it's not done, charges, closure, stick a yellow sign up for 48 hours. And those are kind of action that the inspector can introduce. Okay, but one thing again too, shutting down a restaurant, yes, we're putting people out of work, but very often that I have shut down a place that talk here about. I don't want to name the supermarket name, but it's a big chain supermarket that we shut down. It's all over the newspaper, closed by health department because rodent infestation, food safety violation, and stuff like that. The first thing that comes to our mind is that, boy, we're putting over a couple of hundred people out of work until they reopen. It turns out to be those people continue that stay back. They just do cleaning, they do improvement. Because why? That when the staff helping out, cleaning up, fixing up the establishment to be in full compliance, it's actually part of the hidden education you're teaching them. Okay, together with support like your organization or your school or the private food safety training institution type of helping out on the education side, it's strongly enforcing the food handler to not think, oh man, I got shut down. I was lucky this time I helped clean up the sewage, okay, from being a cashier to cleaning up or whatever. And once you also have a mandatory requirement for food handler certification program, that's what makes a big difference. Lots of people will say,
5 years.
No, actually, on Toronto implemented that back in 2005
Right.
under the local bylaw, making that food certification must be used. We give them about a year to kind of get educated, get the permit or get the certificate. And a food handler has to carry a card, just like my driver license. If I get stopped by a cop, I have to show my insurance and driver license, right? Operator have to do the same thing. They have a card.
What are your
Make it
thoughts
mandatory.
on who in the establishment? I don't know what the local bylaw was before the Ontario's bylaw. The regulation now is one person on site during every open hour.
Yeah.
I believe that the facility's operating.
Yeah.
But I got 10 staff. My manager has the training.
Mm.
What about the other 9? Why don't they need
Yeah.
the training?
Yeah. No, actually, the wording is that one person who appeared to be in charge, what we refer to in the legal term is that the operator of the premises could be a supervisor, could even be a staff member who is in charge on that day, must be certified. Now, remember that's the word is minimum.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of the business already have the staff trained, or they hire people by saying that if you have food handler certification, we'll hire you right on the spot, that type, right?
Yeah.
So the wording is at least one. Because I understand that recently I looked at the Dine Safe record that a couple of restaurants got conditional passes because the inspector wrote down on the inspection report disclosed, I think 2 weeks ago, that failed to have certified food handler on site. That is a 48 hours warning, okay? If not, they can also issue a ticket under the local bylaw. Yes, if you have somebody that mandated to know what they're doing, to be fully certified in food handling through the food safety program, okay, that person now is responsible. So if the inspector comes in, they're not going to talk to a dishwasher or the butcher about the infraction. They're going to say that you in charge today? Yes. You're the operator? Yes. Come with me. That's the term I always use. Okay, it's not fair just to talk to a staff member, but while you shouldn't be doing this, shouldn't be doing that. It's the operator of that day. That operator could even be a staff member. They're not necessarily okay. And that make a difference because they always have to say, okay, so we better get. If your example is that you have 10 people, right, in the restaurant, force them to think that, okay, I can be there. I'm the manager. I can be there 24/7, right? I have to have somebody back me up in case the health inspector come in. So majority of the operator will have as many of the staff member certified. Now remember, just like serving liquor.
I disagree.
You disagree?
I think
because the mandatory
it's
happens.
Sorry,
Pardon me?
I don't think it actually happens like that. And I think it's even harder now because there's a labor shortage. So we do see that restaurateurs, managers will ask for that certification beforehand for the employee to come with it in hand, which is a bonus. I want to see it legislated that everybody has education. I don't necessarily know if we need 6 hours of education like what we cover. I would want to see smaller education more frequent. A few states in the U.S. and I'd like to see $5 and $10 certification. Honestly, that's counter to business person's perspective from a making money perspective. But I think it's important to have more people educated than less, and that's more frequently than less frequently. Every 5, in Alberta until a few years ago, actually, even the regulation still allows Alberta Health Services to issue a certification without an expiration date. They actually used to
Yeah,
promote
that's
that.
yeah,
They used
yeah,
to promote the fact,
yeah,
they used to promote the fact that you would get your certification
no,
and you'd have
no,
it forever.
yeah,
And I don't think that's I think we need to have a more frequent reminder. I like what you
yeah,
said about the inspection and posting the inspection or speaking about
yeah,
it. In our sister company in SafeCheck Brand Protection, one of the audit questions is the previous public health inspection available and posted? And the
yeah,
operators fight us on that as well. Why does it have to be available and why does it have to be posted?
yeah, yeah,
And the simple answer is we want to know that you know
yeah,
what public health pointed out, and
yeah,
we want to see, did you correct what they
yeah,
noted?
that's right. Yeah,
And they say, well, we get this by email or we get it electronically, and we say that's fine. That's
yeah,
great.
yeah,
Print
yeah,
it and post it,
yeah,
because if you know what's happened and you look at that every day, and your staff knows what's
yeah, that's right.
happened, which they were
Yeah,
often embarrassed by,
yeah,
you have a better chance of fixing it.
yeah,
We don't want to see it just for the sake of seeing a piece of paper. We could go
yeah,
to, if it's disclosed on the web, we can easily go and
yeah,
find it there ourselves as
yeah,
well. We want to
that's
know
right.
that you know what
Yeah,
was wrong and that you know that you fixed
yeah,
it or did not fix it.
mhm,
Um,
yeah,
and that's increasingly tough because during the pandemic, you had some places that weren't inspected for over a year,
oh, I know. Yeah, yeah. There's
right?
a lockdown affected the whole inspection program in many, not just your
Oh, no,
local
everywhere.
area.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much affected everywhere. But again, when you brought back into, for example, comparing the risk assessment to issuing of a certification certificate, is that it's nothing is forever. Same as like if I unfortunately, driving is that once you got your driver license, hey, I don't have to be careful. I can drive like crazy. That's how people think sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Now, imagine the risk assessment when you're opening a catering business to nursing home today. Once you assess a high risk, okay, the inspector will say, okay, from now on, you'll be a high risk forever. Okay, that's not true. Every first inspection of the year in Ontario is a risk assessment. Okay, so back to the food handler certification program. Once you issue somebody with a certificate saying that you have passed the food handler training course, okay, and it's good up for 5 years. For some reason, this 5 years is still in Toronto. Pretty much everywhere use the 5 years term. You know, uh, that's because of the mandated requirement. Remember, any enforcement agency from the government side is always based on the law. The law means that minimum requirement.
Yeah.
Okay, it's no law saying that you have to be training every week or whatever. You can't do that, right? But through the education promotion side, operators should take on that as an opportunity, because I know some places they're not a medium-sized restaurant. Once a week they have a staff meeting, and they would add the food safety inspection or sanitation, depending on what they call it, into the meeting agenda.
That's awesome.
Okay, so that make a big difference. We congratulate those people who actually take it seriously, but not everybody. You cannot force people to do it. But so we can give out a lot of example to say that something like this happened now. Okay, do you want your business to be on the front page of newspaper, just like the Jack in the Box hamburger outbreak back in the 90s? Your brand name is right there. We shut down a supermarket in Toronto, a big supermarket in Toronto, and the name was on the front page of the newspaper the next day. Okay, that tastes bitter in a lot of people's mind when you work for a company like that. It's like, oh, I should have said something earlier. I saw that rat running around before the person complained. Okay, but it's too late,
Yeah.
right? Once it happened, hindsight is 2020. You
Yeah.
cannot say that I should have. And what you as a health inspector and also as a manager position, now when people phone in and complain about the inspector, I don't like this person, he picks on me because of this and this. I said, but I saw the report and the picture. A lot of health inspectors now are taking picture during inspection as evidence. Okay, I have a whole collection of 30 pictures that I actually put together like a photo album for training, called 30 pictures of health inspector. When you look at something like that, and we say that you really don't understand food safety when you work in that environment and not doing anything about it. Okay, whose fault is that? It's not the health inspector fault. It's your own business fault that let your establishment run down to a stage that putting customer at risk, and the inspector give you a yellow card. Who's to blame?
Yeah.
So let's start fresh. What are you going to do from now on? That's pretty much the standard reply to people who upset about getting a nasty report from a health inspector. You are responsible. And remember, we talked about that before too. The whole behavior of food operator should change a little bit more. Health inspector only come in to audit and enforce the food regulation. But you run the business, you should be your own health inspector. Do your own inspection. If you see something, correct it right away. Instead of saying, oh, the health inspector will come in next month, he or she will tell me what to do. That's too late, because nowadays, 3 inspections a year, inspector would have really no time to say, come and sit down and educate you for a few hours, teaching your staff on the spot about food safety. That's not really part of the job anymore. Their job is to come in to assess you. Where you're good, you got a pass. You got some problem that can be fixed within 48 hours, you got a yellow card. And if you're bad enough, we are closing you now, okay? And we deal with charges going to be pending later. That's one thing about Dine Safe is that if the inspector shut down a place, once the red card goes up, the follow-up will be enforcement. Enforcement will be either charges. They have to go to court to respond to those charges. And it's no yes, if, or but. It's mandatory. So if you look at other health unit,
inspector in Ontario issue an on-the-spot fine for an infraction?
yes. In Ontario, we have a unique system. Health inspector work for the health unit, also designated as a provincial offences officer. I still got my fancy badge with me. It said provincial offences officer. That gives the inspector the authority to issue either tickets on the spot, that would be with set fine, like fail to fix a dishwasher. I believe that there's a $450 fine. Yes, there's a fine attached to that.
Yeah.
And if it's serious enough, inspector will say that, okay, ticket is not enough to change this business behavior. Inspector can issue summonses. Okay, because the inspector got 6 months to issue those summonses. Once you receive a summons to go to court, the operator has to go to court to defend his or her own action. So that kind of enforcement, to me, from a previous health inspector point of view, it works. Get people's attention.
I don't think any other province has a ticket issuing public health inspector. I don't think. It might be in the Maritime somewhere.
I think some might be, yeah.
Alberta specifically does not. I know that I'm not sure how many years in Ontario public health has had those powers, Jim, but I do know.
Since 80s, yeah.
Since the 80s. Wow.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I know that maybe 10 years ago, I read an Ontario Auditor General report in which the Ontario Auditor General report said specifically about the Ontario public health inspectors, you have these powers. What the heck? Why are you not issuing any tickets?
That's right.
There's only, I don't know what the number was, like 100 tickets for the previous year, right? And they were more or less saying, use these powers to enforce the
Yeah,
regulation,
that's
please.
right. Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
I'm not sure what happened after that. I didn't really pay attention. I'll
yeah,
ask at the SIFE conference what's happened since then.
yeah.
I know back to the education part, somebody in Ontario did do a study. They were doing a small pilot, and we want to fund a pilot like that on a bigger scale, where they had schools and I believe 20 restaurants where they did train or offered training to all the staff.
Yeah.
And they wanted to see, and they increased the inspections, I believe, to 6. And they wanted to see what the correlation was between a more trained staff and the outcomes of the inspections. And I believe the results were that the inspections were better. And it's a pretty simple mindset to get into, to say that, hey, if we have a better educated staff in whatever it is, never mind food safety, right? That your outcomes are going to be better. So Ontario did something like that maybe just before the pandemic. I remember that study coming out. Let's just quickly before we sign off here, let's get back to Jay touched on it a little bit. Public health here and probably everywhere across Canada and maybe probably even around the world. They're sitting right now and they're looking at what are our risks and what have we done or not done to prevent a similar issue in our own backyard. And I think that's a really tough thing, because as much as public health can maybe do more enforcement or more follow-up, the challenge is it's still up to the operator.
Yeah.
So what really could public health do to prevent this?
It's really like I said, the proactive inspection always work. If you identify, say, as all the food safety infraction documented, and do have a follow-up system to make sure they are being done, and not just being done, but not repeated again. Okay, that is a challenge for the health inspector. So everyday inspection will have a follow-up with correction of any items. So that's what I refer to as a proactive inspection system. Again, increasing the number of frequency of inspection is going to be a challenge for any health unit with budget cut, with resources being limited or whatever. I still think that the 3 times inspection for high-risk establishment, say in Ontario, it works. But you have to beef up the system to be proactive. A hazard-based inspection that every time the inspector walks in, unannounced, have to be unannounced, and with a good follow-up or a strong follow-up to the inspection system to make sure things are not just being corrected, but not being repeated. And that's the challenge. Again, the work between the enforcement and the education, such as school like yourself, that if people refuse to change their attitude, voluntary, it's really hard to mandatory and force somebody to change their attitude. The only thing to do is either suspension of a permit, suspension of a license, go to court to defend your action, because all those become public record, and things like that. Other than that, the health inspector can continue to work with all food operator. Okay, like I used to say that if you don't work with me, the inspector still continue to come in to inspect your establishment the same way, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
If you want to work with me, I'll give you some recommendation. speak with your staff, meet with your boss or meet with the owner or whatever, and just saying that inspector going to come back next time with the same inspection report.
Yeah.
Okay, and you continue going to be facing a similar situation with the yellow card, unless each of the health unit will take that on. Have to remember that. I can tell people that, oh, I'm an educator.
Yeah.
It means that I'm telling you that don't be afraid. If you don't do what I said, nothing will happen. You cannot let people sense that that's the job of the health inspector.
Yeah.
Why they call inspector? Because they have the authority, like the study you just mentioned. Inspector have the authority to do this and this. And why didn't you do it? Remember, the word is why didn't you do it?
Yeah.
Okay. Any of the health inspector in Ontario, once they work for the health unit, you automatically designated as a provincial offences officer. So all the health inspector has the authority to issue a ticket or to issue summonses.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be like a parking meter person, go
No.
around and issue tickets, right? It always a last resource. If people just don't want to listen to a health inspector, what else you can do? You can't just say, oh, I'll give up. I'm going to go home and go fishing or whatever. You can't do that. It's still a job that you have to follow up. Yeah. And when you look at your own authority, okay, you have a badge, you call a provincial offences officer. I can use this as a last resource.
Yeah.
Okay. And very often it works. You still have a minority of the number of people that still, I don't believe in this and this and that. No matter what you do, you can't get 100%. But if you can reduce, just like in Dine Safe, the record of Dine Safe, this is public information anyway. The first year when Dine Safe first posted the sign, that's 2001, the compliance rate was 74 to 76% compliance. That means that they got the green pass through the year. In the mid 2000, it jumped up to 85, I believe, 85 to 86%. And that's, we also implemented the mandatory food handler certification program. And then the stats after that, up to when I left Toronto, it was 90 to 92%. Very uniform standard every year, but they still have about 8 to 9% conditional pass. And that's reality, right?
Yeah.
You can meet people down in, yeah. So, but the percentage of 90 some odd percent compliance, to me, is a success in a program that enforced by public health inspector.
Yeah, agreed.
The number of closures is really low. It's around 1% of the bad operator.
Yeah, and I think, well, I think congratulations on being the point of the spear on that program anyway to implement it. I know there's a team around you that you did.
Yeah, it's a teamwork. Yeah,
but you did it, and that you were in the right place at the right time to make it happen.
That's correct. Yeah.
The sad part, I think, of our discussion is that here we are this many years later, and we're still talking about these things. I think Jay, the Bill Marler from the Jack in the Box, he's the food safety lawyer.
Yeah.
He said, 20 years later or 25 years later, however many years later, he had hoped that these things would go away, and obviously they have not. Yeah. And I guess my hope would be is that if one listener listened to this podcast and took one piece of all the things you said and went back to their facility, their restaurant, their seniors home, their daycare center, whatever it is, and they made the one change that will further protect their clients, their kids they serve, or even at home, then all this effort was worth it. Obviously, our hope is for more. Jim, many thanks for joining us.
Okay.
I'm sure we'll have you on in the future to talk about food safety. This is our podcast, is what we do. I would ask you for just one more thought before you go, because we really do have to go. Do you think that, and I meant to ask this earlier, and maybe I did, I don't remember, but I don't think so. Do you think that having a food safety plan or a HACCP plan in a central kitchen should be a requirement? Now, not necessarily HACCP as if I'm a CFI facility, because most of these places are provincial under the provincial regulation.
That's right.
So, but is having a food safety plan, should that be a requirement in a central kitchen? Because Jay, as we had spoken previously, having that plan in place would force you to identify versus the risk assessment that public health does. In your case, you say annually. Would that be helpful for a facility to have that in place? Yeah,
I totally agree. It's not just hopefully it be helpful. It should be helpful if a food establishment. I remember, central kitchen is one thing. We have a lot of ghost kitchen now going around, but they also inspected here too. They're being disclosed whether they got the signage or not. But if the inspector identified the central kitchen is serving a high-risk population.
Yes.
Okay. Don't forget, the customer is also a health inspector's plan to protect, not the operator. Okay. So if you're serving food from a central kitchen to one or more, up to 10 or even 100 establishment, everything coming out from one central kitchen, but they're hitting all this customer which is in a high risk category, senior home, hospital, daycare, like kids, okay? That immediately, that central kitchen should be identified as a high risk. And based on the high risk, they must have a HACCP plan improved. They not necessarily have to be like a CFIA type of formal high-risk plan. But a high-risk plan means that if you take the inspection report here from a Dine Safe, this is actually the 8th step to a pass. It's all based on the HACCP to identify critical control points, okay? All the operator have to do is to implement that. Okay, remember, we're not necessarily all through Canada that people can have a pass, conditional pass, or closure. But on the other hand, the inspection process put in some policy. Somebody in that kitchen has to do an inspection once a day, once a week. Okay, be your own health inspector.
Yes,
and then you can enforce it by getting it done. If you start seeing cockroaches running around the kitchen, or one of the food handlers start picking the nose or scratching the ear and doing all this thing, if you look the other way, you fail as an operator. Let's not blame the health inspector for not doing anything when somebody really gets sick. Okay, so again, back to your point, they should, a high-risk establishment like a central kitchen or catering kitchen should have a HACCP or food safety policy put in place that being practiced. Staff should be trained based on that policy. On a regular basis. Okay, not necessarily every day, but the self-inspection I always push for. If you don't do your daily inspection of your kitchen before you open for business, you never know what you're going to run into. Okay, you don't get a busy lunch hour, you got 400 people booked for lunch, and then you realize that you don't have hot water. Because you didn't have hot water for the past week, right?
Let's not forget that I agree. Successful multi-unit operators often have what Jim is just talking about. They don't necessarily have HACCP, but they'll have
policy.
They'll have a line check. They'll have an opening check. They'll have a closing check. They'll have a spot check of, check one hamburger, one chicken breast, one
Yeah.
thing as part of their
Yeah.
process to, you know, used to be the daily manager's logbook or something, right? But they have those things in place. Let's also say, in fairness to the facility involved, we don't know whether they do or do not have something like this in place right now.
Yeah.
And maybe they do, and there was a system failure, and that's possible.
That's right.
Again, Jim, we really, really appreciate your insight and your sharing some of what, you know, the Dine Safe was about. We hope to have you on again. I want to have a series of shows all about dirty dining, and it's funny you say that the Toronto Star called it dirty dining. In the U.S., if you YouTube dirty dining,
dirty dining,
you will see many, usually a Fox station, but many a segment on in the news where they highlight basically they name and shame restaurants.
name and shame,
So I don't think we'll ever have that here, but I hope not. I would hope that restaurants would do everything to avoid just that, and not for the sake of not being on the news, but for the sake of protecting the public. Jim, thank you very much for joining us. Jay,
thank you.
Thank you. Jim will be in touch shortly. And Jay, thanks again for working through all these technical issues.
And you know, there's almost lunchtime now too. So remember dirty dining.